Good morning, everybody. Happy February 1st. It's Tuesday, February 1st, and we're here for my Tuesday, Thursday Abnormal Psychology class. I see lots of you getting logged in and getting your names in the chat, so that's fantastic. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here reading that Tom Brady officially announced his retirement, feeling sad. So I'm like, oh, brutal football weekend for me. My favorite player of all time retired. And then my other team with Mahomes didn't make it to the Super Bowl. I'm like, oh, football, it let me down this weekend. But so now I guess I'm rooting for the Rams uh, to have a good Super Bowl game. I do love little Cooper Cup, but yeah, my guy retiring. I don't know what I'm going to do in the fall. And my other guy didn't make it to the Super Bowl. So I was just like sitting here reading it as we were getting ready to start. So oh, crazy, crazy, but still a couple of really great football games. And I hope everyone is doing well and hanging in there. We are in week number 4. Really hard to believe that we're in week 4 at this point. We do have our first part of our paper due this week, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And we finally get to start talking about the disorders this week. We move into anxiety disorders as of yesterday morning. So some kind of exciting things, at least kind of on the horizon for us today and for this week. So our plan for today, like usual, I'm going to go over a little bit of feedback from last week. I'm going to share a list of slang terms that I compiled from all of your posts, along with a few other ones that I had from previous semesters. We'll go over the discussion from last week. I have some reminders for you for this week, and we'll talk about that first part of the paper so you know what to turn in and so on. And then I'll give you the extra credit question and see if you have any questions for me. So that is our plan for today. So let's go ahead and head over to Canvas together to do some things. So again, we are in week number 4 as of yesterday morning. Still no news or update or anything from the college. So again, we have all of this week and all of next week that we are virtual, and then we will see what happens as we get to week 6. We're supposed to be back in person, but I haven't heard anything else quite yet. So continue to stay tuned. I'll let you know as soon as I hear anything. But for now, we're right here. We still have this week and next week before we have that going on. So if we go back to last week just for a moment, I gave you what I think is a really interesting kind of counter perspective to the mainstream last week, and it was fun reading all of your reactions to the little article that I had you read by Thomas Zaz. The vast majority of you, I would say, did not agree with what he proposed. A lot of you said no, like I myself have suffered from mental illness, or I know people who do. I would not say it's a myth. I would say the vast majority of you tended to disagree with him. A few of you said I could see some of his points, but I largely disagree. And I tend to disagree as well, but I do think that it is a really interesting perspective. And it's one that a lot of people do tend to embrace, that mental illness is either a myth or it's overdiagnosed, that there are issues with the whole system of mental illness. And that definitely can be true. So I wanted you to have a chance to see the opposite perspective. A lot of you came up with some fantastic slang terms and phrases. Again, I have a whole list, so let me read these to you because I think it's kind of fun to hear. I just saved them in a document so you can follow along with me. Okay, so these are the ones I compiled: basket case, belong in a loony bin, nuts, mental, crazy, psycho, spastic, schizo, mad, insane, loony, freak, bananas, wacko, oddball, retard, wears a straitjacket, she's off her rocker, not firing on all cylinders, has a screw loose, not playing with a full deck, mad as a hatter, the lights are on but there's nobody home, lost his marbles, the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top floor, the cookie doesn't crumble the right way, and my favorite, a few fries short of a happy meal. So those are just kind of a list of some of the ones you came up with. There are a lot of slang terms. Obviously, that's not the most proper or kind way to refer to somebody with a mental illness, but it is something that a lot of people do use, and just something interesting to think about and be aware of as we start to talk about the different disorders. So really nicely done for the most part on the discussion. Only a couple of people forgot to respond to a classmate, so I'll continue to remind you about that. And a few of you, I wanted a little bit more. So make sure to, again, always elaborate and answer things fully and show off your knowledge, comprehension, and ability to apply the materials. But overall, really, really nicely done on the materials for last week. A lot of you also got the extra credit points for Twitch extra credit number 3. So wonderful job. We move now into week number 4. And this week we are looking at anxiety disorders, the most common group of disorders that there are as far as all of the disorders go. A lot of people struggle with anxiety. And so for this week, kind of your usual tasks plus one extra thing. So first thing you're going to want to do is read chapter 4 in the textbook to get that nice kind of broad overview of everything related to our chapter. And then here are the PowerPoint slides and the lecture video. So the lecture video is just a Zoom link. Definitely make sure that you are taking notes and paying attention. I have lots of little video clips in here. A very, very interesting topic. A lot of movies and shows featuring characters with anxiety disorders. And I'm sure a lot of you, either yourself or maybe people in your life, struggle with these disorders as well. They are very, very common. And I think even more so right now than ever, right? A lot of people struggling with anxiety because of COVID and the world being the way that it has been for the last 2 years. These are definitely very common disorders that we're covering. Now, I want to mention something. I forgot to mention this in the lecture video. And so I'm going to talk about it now just for a moment. And a little hint or preview, this will probably be your extra credit question for this week. But I forgot to mention in the lecture that every single disorder that we're going to talk about, starting this week all the way to the end of the semester, has 2 criteria that are common to every single one. And I forgot to tell you what these were, so I just want to mention it here. 2 criteria for every single disorder. One of them, the first one, is that it has to cause significant distress or impairment. So in order to be qualified as a disorder, a person has to experience significant distress and impairment from the different symptoms that they're experiencing. So this kind of goes back to those D's of abnormality, right? It affects your life in some way. It's making it difficult for you to function, difficult for you to carry on your daily life. But criteria 1, it causes significant distress and impairment in multiple areas of your life. Criteria 2, that again is common to every single disorder, is that it cannot be caused by a general medical condition or the use of a substance. Now, this is something that will come back when we talk about substance disorders later on. In order to be a psychological disorder, it cannot be caused by a general medical condition, so it can't be a purely medical physical condition, and it cannot be due to the use of a substance. So if somebody is struggling with anxiety because they're using cocaine, it's actually considered a cocaine-related disorder, not an anxiety disorder. We'll talk about that more when we get to chapter 10, but those are the 2 criteria. Again, 1, must cause significant distress and impairment across multiple areas of your life, and 2, cannot be due to the use of to a general medical condition or the use of a substance. So just something to point out. The other thing I want to mention is that it is a very, very common psychology student phenomenon to think that you have every single disorder that we cover. So as I'm going through all these disorders with you all semester, if you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, and that's me too, and I have 73 disorders, right? There's no way. So you might have elements of each disorder. Most of us have some degree of every little disorder that we cover, right? Some little element of it. But only, again, if it's causing you that distress and impairment, if it is, if you're meeting all the criteria and the duration. So just something to keep in mind, right? If you start to think that you have every disorder, you definitely don't. But, if one of them sounds like it fits you, you could always look up the specific criteria and get a little bit more information about it. Why isn't significant loss part of a criteria? So the hard thing about loss, right, is that's where we get that 5th D that I added of duration, right? So we don't consider loss to be a disorder, right? And so I think probably what you're getting at, Laura, or my guess at what you're getting at, is that it can't be due to like a loss, right? Something that would be like an acceptable reason to be struggling. But since there's no like definition of what's acceptable and what isn't, what we tend to look at is if somebody has experienced those symptoms due to a loss, like, yeah, like a death or a job or lost a home or a partner, a relationship, right? All of those things to react to are normal and typical, but it could go beyond normal and typical if you react more severely or maybe for a longer duration. There is actually a disorder called adjustment disorder where where we tend to diagnose somebody who's gone through a loss or a significant adjustment. It can be diagnosed as a disorder. It tends to be a little bit more short term, but there is actually a disorder called adjustment disorder that accounts for loss or change of life circumstances. So yeah, and I think a big part of that is that it is kind of a general like mentality, but it definitely isn't a criteria for the disorder. Something, good and interesting to think about. So just keep those things in mind as we go through. If again you think that you have all of them, you definitely don't, right? You might have one or two or elements of a couple of disorders, but definitely don't have every disorder that we cover. So let's look at discussion number 4 that we have for this week. So again, finally into the disorders. Very exciting to finally get to cover the disorders here. So as always, here are your instructions at the top. Make sure that you watch my brief little introduction video, and then you're going to answer all of the questions in the prompt below. Don't forget to elaborate. Think of them as like little mini papers. Show off your understanding. Also, don't forget, as always, to read through a minimum of 5 of your classmates' responses and to reply to one of them. And that the whole thing is worth 15 points, right? 13 for your responses and 2 for your responses to a classmate. So your questions for this week related to chapter 4. Number 1, using a specific example, describe the difference between a fear and a phobia, right? So for example, if you chose flying, right? A lot of people have a fear of flying. What would it look like if somebody had a fear of flying versus a phobia of flying, right? So pick a specific example and describe what it would look like for somebody to have a fear of it versus a phobia of it. So you might describe their behavior or their reactions. You could bring definitions in if that helps you, but make sure that you're specific and detailed in your differences. Number 2, do you personally have a phobia or describe or know somebody who has one and describe? I'm not sure if I can't remember if I told you in the lecture or not. I definitely have a phobia of spiders and also the power going out, right? I'll share that with you randomly. When the power goes out, I feel like a flood of panic, right? It's something that totally scares me. I think it's because I've seen too many scary movies. And the second the power goes out, I associate it with like zombies are coming or bad things are going to happen. I have watched too many scary movies for sure. I love them, but then I pay the price afterward. But do you personally know anyone who has a phobia, or do yourself? And make sure you describe. You can always look up the technical name for it too. That's always fun. Number 3, using the example given above in question 2, so phobias, and if you didn't know anyone, you can come up with an example. Describe 2 different methods that could be used to treat that phobia. So what are 2 different approaches from the lecture or textbook that could be used to treat the phobia that you talked about in number 2? And then number 4, as discussed in the lecture, OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, is often rooted in superstitious thinking. Give 2 examples of a superstitious belief and explain the root or history of those superstitions. You might need to Google this or look it up online to get that information, and that's totally fine. You do not need to cite your source or anything like that, but please make sure you do a little research if you need to. You probably will need to get that root or history. But what are 2 different superstitious beliefs, and explain the root of those superstitions? One of my favorites, right? Throwing salt over your shoulder. If you spill the salt, you have to throw salt over your shoulder. I always think of Dumb and Dumber, right, where he throws the whole salt container over his shoulder. Maybe I'm dating myself at that point by mentioning that movie. But the idea was to blind the demons that are behind you that would bring you bad luck, right? And so again, you would describe the superstition and then give me some thoughts on the root or history of that superstitious belief. Really, really interesting and kind of fun to look at. You can think of superstitions that maybe you have in your life and look those up, or just common ones, whatever one you would like. So that is the discussion for this week. Again, don't forget to not only reply to my questions by hitting reply, but also reply to a classmate. And make sure you're saving these. There have been a couple of cases in the last week where somebody's post didn't go through, or maybe there was an error, and because people had saved it, it came in handy, and they were still able to get those points. So definitely save your responses just in case. You never know when there might be, an issue or whatever. So that is the discussion for this week. And then you do have one other thing, and I talked about this really briefly last week, that I wanted you to start thinking about it. But part one of your diagnosis paper is due this week. So with part one, this is worth 10 points. It's not a lot, but you are committing to a character from a TV show or a movie. And you can change this later, but obviously the sooner you commit, the better off you're going to be, just the less work you have to do. So let's open this up. If you click on the link here, it will bring up the instructions for the paper. And so for this class, you'll be writing a paper diagnosing a character, and it's divided into 3 parts. The first part is the selection. Then later we'll have the outline and sources, and then eventually the final paper. Altogether, this paper in the end is going to be 5 to 6 pages, not including the title or references page. But for now, we are just on part 1, which should be roughly a page. This is a couple of paragraphs, 1 page in length, but you do need to type it up and include a couple of pieces of information. So by this Sunday at 11:59 p.m., you'll turn in a brief statement including your TV show or movie selection and a citation, along with a short description of why you selected this particular show or movie. So it should be roughly a page, and the contents of your paper is you're going to tell me what is the movie or show that you're selecting and what character are you selecting, right? So if you decided that you wanted to select, I just looked up and saw Harry Potter books, right? If you wanted to diagnose Harry Potter, you would say the character that I'm selecting is Harry Potter. I have some thoughts about, some things that are going on with him. I think that maybe he made the whole thing up and he suffers from schizophrenia and delusions of grandeur, and he wasn't actually a powerful wizard. He just suffered from neglect, right? That's probably more than you have for this part, but somebody wrote a paper to that end a few years ago, super creative. But what I want you to do here is just tell me who you're going to analyze and why you're interested in them. And if you have any kind of early thoughts about them having a disorder or not having a disorder that you want to argue, this would be a great place to put it in there. And then I want you to give me the citation information for your show. It doesn't have to be in any particular format. You will be putting it in APA format later, but for now you don't need to worry about it. I just want it to be there so that you have it later on to reference. So when you're ready to answer this, and again, it's only maybe a paragraph or 2 along with that citation, you'll go up here and you'll hit Start Assignment. And when you click on that, it's going to open up a spot where you can upload a file, right? And remember, if we go all the way to the top, you can do doc, docx, PDF, and RTF, right? So if you have pages, you'll have to convert it to a PDF or whatever. This is worth 10 points. It's due before this Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. And again, you can always change your character later, but try to pick somebody that you're interested in, right? It can be someone from a TV show, a movie. I've had people do video game characters. It can be a real person or a completely fictional one, animated. It could be anyone, right? And some of the most creative papers that I've seen have been characters that you might not expect, right? Like the one I mentioned just a moment ago with Harry Potter, or people diagnosing Disney characters. Anything could be new, old, or whatever it is that you are interested in. Does anyone, as a side note, there are about 20 of you in here. Does anybody have a character in mind that you wouldn't mind putting in the chat? Anybody have somebody you're thinking of going with? If you do, put them in the chat. I would love to hear, and I'm sure your classmates are curious too. But anyone have some thoughts? Who are you going to analyze? You don't have to have ideas about diagnoses yet. Just who are you thinking of doing? And again, this is something that you will submit right here through Canvas, and it's worth 10 points. So please be sure to do this. I think it's a good start. It's 10 points. You want to make sure you get those, and then we'll be building on that throughout the rest of the semester. SpongeBob, okay. Dwight from The Office, awesome. Those are I've never had anyone do SpongeBob before. That's funny. Oh no, now I have it in my head. The Who Lives in a Pineapple. It's in my head now for the day. Thanks. Thanks, Gracie. Luke Skywalker. Oh, that's a fun one too. I did have somebody do that once or twice. Luke Skywalker. That's a fun one though. Okay, we have someone from Wreck-It Ralph. Okay, great. All right. Is it Vanellope from Wreck-It Ralph? Great. Anybody else? There's so many characters, and again, it could be someone new or old. But start thinking about who you want to do. Make sure that you submit this before Sunday night. It is the first 10 points of the paper, so you want to make sure that you definitely get those. Okay. BoJack Horseman. I don't know who that is, right? I'll be curious to hear, right? And I love this too. This is some of my favorite papers to read because I love movies and shows, and so it's very fun to hear about new ones. And I do have some sample papers up here that I'll talk about later in the semester. But if you ever want to look at some sample papers from past semesters, these are some great ones. Ooh, Daenerys. Right, I love Game of Thrones. That was one of my favorite shows. John Wick, another great character, right? Super interesting guy. Daenerys, super interesting. Right? I still hate the way that show ended. I loved that show, and then the last season drove me nuts. And I know I'm not alone on that one. But those are great. Those are great. Great people so far. And again, I really look forward to seeing who the rest of you come up with. I'll share some of the highlights of that next week. But that's fantastic. I look forward to hearing the rest of your characters in that submission this week. Okay. Yeah, right. The ending was awful, where she was so good the whole way through, and then just like a moment of weakness, and just I could go on, right? That it made me mad, and I know a lot of people made a lot of people mad. So those are the big things for this week, right? Read chapter 4 in the textbook, watch the lecture video, you have the slides, discussion number 4 on phobias and fears and anxiety. Don't forget the diagnosis paper. That first parts were 10 points. Turn that in before the end of the week. And then we do have the extra credit. Of course, I will post the recording of this later today. So you can look for that later on in case you missed part of this or you cut out or had to leave early. The recording will be up later on today. So a couple of quick reminders and a few questions. This would be a great time to put those in the chat while I'm giving you a few reminders. So since we are in week number 4, as I mentioned, remember that the Twitch subscription is only good for 30 days. So what you might find is that some of you fall off in the next couple of days if you subscribed when the class started. So just make sure that you double check that. I'll remind you every week, but make sure that you're double checking that. If you need to renew it, it renews for free for 30 days. And so you'll probably have to do that a couple of times over the semester. The other thing to remind you of is our next Twitch, live stream. I can't type. Will be on Tuesday next week. Tuesday next week is what? Oh my gosh, too many things. Tuesday the 8th. So Tuesday 2/8 at 8:30 in the morning. Okay, and that could potentially be our last Twitch live stream if we're going back in person after that. But again, 1 week at a time, right? I've definitely been working on and thinking about the things for next couple of weeks from now. But 1 week at a time, we will plan on next Tuesday morning at 8:30 in the morning for our next live stream. The other thing, I do have the extra credit question for you, so let me get that to you. I saved it so that I could just copy it. Okay. So this is what I talked about earlier. So if you have forgotten, you could always go back and watch the recording later on because I did talk about this quite a bit at earlier in the stream. So your extra credit question for this week is what are the 2 criteria that are required or common to every single disorder? So I went over these quite a bit earlier. What are the 2 criteria that are required or common for every single disorder that we're going to talk about this semester? And when you're ready to answer that, you'll head over to Canvas. And since we're in week 4, you'll click on Twitch extra credit number 4 right here. Up at the top, once that loads, you'll hit on Start Assignment right here at the top. And then you can type your response in the text box and then hit Submit Assignment down here. confetti burst. What else do we get today? Confetti and thumbs up, right? And then remember, this is due before Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. If you answer this early and get it wrong, or somehow get the wrong stream question, I will let you know, and you'll have time to try again. But don't forget to continue doing these. Once we go back in person, we won't have these Twitch extra credit opportunities. So continue to do them while you can, and I think that'll be nice and helpful for you. Yes, I'm actually really glad that you asked that. Is it Sarah or Sahar? I'm not sure. Hard to know what your Twitch name is here. But yes, I'm glad that you asked that. So no matter what happens with us going back or not going back, if we go back in person, if you're looking at the schedule, let's go to modules really quickly. Scroll down. So our first exam is week number 5. So our first exam is next week. So we are completely virtual next week still, no matter what. So our first exam is online, right? And I'm actually considering and thinking about, and if you have any opinions that you would like to throw out there, I'm open to hearing them. I'm actually considering making all of our exams online for the semester. So I have them all. I had to put them all into Canvas, which was a lot of work. And exam days are stressful. And so I'm debating making exam days a virtual day. So what that would mean is you wouldn't have to come to the campus or the class, and you would complete the exam online for that day. And so you would have the entire day to do it. It would be open notes and open book, and you would take it completely online. If we did it traditionally, you would sit in the classroom with a Scantron and take it with me in the room, and you would not have access to your notes or your book. So just something I'm thinking about. Anytime we have a guest speaker or a day that could be virtual, I will likely lean toward that just as a measure of safety. It feels like anytime that we can reduce our risk and safety, increase our safety and reduce our risk, it's probably a good idea. So I don't know how all of you feel about that. If we meet in person, we can talk about that together. But I am thinking about having all of your exams be virtual, just so that you have less anxiety. You're able to use your notes in your book and take that in the comfort of your home, rather than sitting in a room with a mask and dealing with the anxiety of the exam along with the anxiety of being in the room. So just something I'm thinking about. And again, if you have an opinion on that, I'd love to hear it. If you're like, that sounds amazing or that sounds awful, feel free to put that in there. Yeah, we have another professor who also decided to do that. She told us she knows stress lowers your immune system. She doesn't want a bunch of students to sit down in a room together during COVID with lowered immune systems. Yes, right. And I think right now everyone is so anxious, right? Like we all have anxiety, whether it's about being at home or returning to school or getting COVID or protecting our families, or, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And all of us, anytime I think that we could reduce our anxiety and make sure that we're being safe, I think it's a good idea. So I think even if we do go back in person, we will have some days that will be like virtual or alternate like days of instruction that are online. So that will definitely happen, just because of the nature of the semester. We would be mainly in person, but we will have some days like exams or guest speakers that we will probably do virtually. So again, stay tuned on all that. But no matter what, next week we are virtual 100% no matter what. And our first exam will be online. And I will talk about that quite a bit next week. So next week, I'll go over the exam, how to study, how to prepare. If you wanted to start studying now, if you scroll all the way up to the top, right, you do already have the study guide right here. So if you really wanted to start preparing for the exam next week, which isn't a bad idea, you could start reviewing the study guide. I'll go over that next week. If you have any questions about the study guide, that'd be a great time to ask me. But I'll go over that and how to take the exam and tips and things for that next week for our next stream. Okay, so those are the last kind of reminders. Again, our next live stream will be next Tuesday morning, just like this week at 8:30 in the morning. If you have any questions, that's the end of my announcements and materials for you. So if you have any questions, I'll hang out for a little while and I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, get going on the materials for this week. Make sure you pick your TV show or movie character. It could be, again, anyone. Make sure to double check that subscription status. If you haven't done it, you still can at any time. That would be great. Yeah, and if you have a question, perfect. I would love it. That's what I'm here for. And if you need to go, we're officially done with our, things that we have that I had for you. So if you need to take off, you're welcome to. Have a wonderful week. Otherwise, I'll hang out for a little bit. And yeah, go ahead if you have your a question about last week. Feel free to ask away. And again, otherwise, have a fantastic week. Enjoy the weather. Enjoy. There's not a lot of football this weekend. Pro Bowl, Super Bowl's the following week. I look forward to that. But have a wonderful week and take care of yourselves. And like I said, I'll hang out for a little while if you do have any questions. Okay, let's see. Are the key features for the MMPI the same as the 10 scales on the MMPI on page 80? Well, I don't have my book in front of me. I don't have my book here to check. But yes, the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2, does have multiple scales on it. And the textbook does go over what those scales are. And so it's a lot related to introversion and extroversion and gender identity. There are things related to anxiety, to psychosis. So yeah, I believe that the book is pretty accurate, though I don't have it in front of me to look. But yes, the MMPI, even though it's a little bit outdated, is a very, very commonly used test. It has those scales, and it is something that is usually graded by printout, almost like a Scantron in a way. Okay. Yeah, thank you as well. I hope you have a great day as well, a great week. Again, take care of yourselves, try and stay healthy, and I will see you next Tuesday morning at 8:30 for our next stream. Yeah, no worries, Laura, no problem. So I'm going to minimize my video, but I will hang out for a little while here if you do have any questions. You too, have a wonderful day. All right, everyone, it looks like I'm the only one on here. So if you think of any other questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, and I will see you all next Tuesday.